The blood on Rose Valenti's hands had dried to a rust-colored stain by the time Dr. Morrison shook his head solemnly and walked out of the bedroom. It wasn't her blood, it belonged to the baby boy who had never drawn his first breath. Colorado Territory, 1878, was an unforgiving place where death visited often, but never had it felt so cruel as it did on this spring morning in Cherry Creek. Rose sat motionless beside the small crib she'd spent months preparing. The lace trim on the tiny blanket her mother had sent from Boston still looked crisp and new, never to be crumpled by restless infant limbs. The wooden rattle her husband Thomas had carved lay untouched on the side table. "Mrs. Valenti, you need to rest," the doctor's wife urged gently, touching Rose's shoulder. "I'll have someone come clean up." Rose barely registered the woman's words. Her throat felt raw from the hours of screaming during labor, only to be met with silence instead of a baby's cry. Thomas had been gone for 3 months now, killed when his horse spooked near the mine entrance. She'd been 6 months along then, her rounded belly the only comfort in her grief. "Please leave me," Rose whispered, her voice a fragile thing. "I need to be alone." After the doctor and his wife departed, Rose remained frozen by the crib, watching as the sun climbed high and then began its descent beyond the mountains. Cherry Creek had seemed like such a promising place when they'd arrived from Boston 2 years earlier. Thomas had been certain the silver mine would make their fortune. Now, the small cottage at the edge of town felt like a tomb. The knock at her door came as dusk settled over the valley. Rose ignored it, but whoever stood outside was persistent. After the 5th round of knocking, she finally rose on unsteady legs and made her way through the small house. When she pulled open the door, the tall figure of Samuel Whitman filled the frame. She knew him only vaguely, one of the cattle ranchers who owned land outside of town. His dark hat was clutched in his hands, revealing sandy brown hair that needed cutting. "Mrs. Valenti," he said, his deep voice hesitant, "I heard what happened. I brought some food from my housekeeper." He gestured to a covered basket at his feet. Rose stared at him blankly. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but his eyes were kind beneath the worry lines. She couldn't summon the energy to respond. "May I bring this inside for you?" he asked when the silence stretched too long. She stepped back wordlessly, allowing him entry. Samuel, Sam, as most folks called him, moved with the careful precision of a man accustomed to small spaces despite his large frame. He placed the basket on her kitchen table and then stood awkwardly, twisting his hat in his hands. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Valenti. If there's anything you need." "There's nothing anyone can do," Rose said, her voice hollow. "My husband is dead. My child is dead. I have nothing." Sam shifted uncomfortably. "I understand, madam. I lost my wife and daughter to fever 3 years back." Rose looked at him properly then, seeing the shadow of familiar grief in his eyes. She hadn't known about his family. "I should go," he said after another lengthy silence. "But I'll check on you tomorrow, if that's all right." Rose didn't respond, and he took her silence as permission to leave. After the door closed behind him, she returned to the small room with the empty crib, crawled into her bed, and finally let the tears come. True to his word, Sam returned the next day, and the day after. Sometimes he brought food. Other times he simply chopped wood for her stove or repaired things around the property that Thomas had left unfinished. Rose barely spoke during these visits, but Sam didn't seem to mind the silence. A week after the stillbirth, Rose found herself in the small nursery room again, fingering the blankets and tiny clothes she'd sewn with such hope. When Sam arrived for his daily check-in, she didn't hear him enter. He found her sitting beside the crib, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Valenti," he said softly from the doorway. Rose looked up, her honey-brown hair falling loose around her shoulders. "I can't bring myself to take it apart," she whispered. Sam surveyed the little room, the crib with its untouched bedding, the rocking chair in the corner, the chest filled with baby clothes, the cheerful yellow curtains she'd sewn to brighten the space. "You still built a room for hope," he said quietly. "That's not something to be ashamed of." Rose's tears flowed faster. Hope is cruel. I have nothing left to hope for. Sam entered the room then, his large frame seeming out of place among the delicate furnishings. He crouched down before her, his weathered hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair. Mrs. Valenti rose. If I may, grief isn't something that heals quickly, but it does change with time. I know it seems impossible now, but you will find reasons to keep going. How? She asked, her voice breaking. How did you find reason to continue after losing your family? Sam's eyes clouded with the memory. One day at a time. I woke up each morning and told myself to breathe until nightfall. Then I'd do it again the next day. After a while, I started noticing things again: the sunset, the smell of coffee, small things that reminded me I was still alive. Rose looked at the small wooden horse Thomas had carved for their child. I don't know if I want to be alive anymore. I understand that feeling too, Sam said, but the world still needs you in it, Rose Valenti, even if you can't see why just yet. In the days that followed, Sam's visits became part of Rose's routine. Though she rarely initiated conversation, she found herself watching him as he worked around her property, repairing the porch steps, tending to the small vegetable garden that had been neglected, bringing fresh milk from his ranch. His presence was steadying, undemanding. As spring bloomed fully into summer, Rose gradually emerged from the fog of her grief. She began taking over the cooking when Sam visited, insisting he stay for a meal after his work. They ate together in mostly comfortable silence, though occasionally Sam would share stories of his cattle or news from town. One evening in late June, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Sam cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Valenti rose. I've been meaning to ask something of you. Rose turned to him, her face still thin from grief but no longer gaunt. What is it, Mr. Whitman? Sam, please, he corrected gently. I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, is getting on in years and can't manage everything alone. I was wondering if you might consider taking a position there. The house is large, and you'd have your own quarters. The work would be, well, I think having purpose might help. Rose considered his offer. Her small savings were dwindling, and she'd soon need to find a way to support herself. The thought of working in someone else's home in town, facing their pity daily, was unbearable. I'm not much of a housekeeper, she admitted. Thomas and I had servants in Boston. Sam smiled slightly. I'm not looking for perfection, just willing hands. Mrs. Fletcher can teach you what you need to know. Rose looked out at the mountains again, thinking of the emptiness that awaited her in the cottage each night. I'll consider it, Sam. Thank you for the offer. 2 weeks later, Rose packed her belongings into a trunk. She left the nursery untouched, closing the door firmly behind her. Sam loaded her things into his wagon and helped her up onto the seat beside him. As they drove away from the cottage, Rose didn't look back. The Whitman ranch was larger than Rose had imagined, a sprawling property with a handsome 2-story main house, several outbuildings, and pastures dotted with cattle stretching toward the distant mountains. A stream cut through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. Mrs. Fletcher, a stout woman with silver hair and kind eyes, welcomed Rose warmly. It's about time this place had a younger woman's touch, she said, showing Rose to her room's a comfortable bedroom with an adjoining sitting room on the second floor, overlooking the eastern pasture. Rose settled into a routine at the ranch. She helped Mrs. Fletcher with the cooking, learned to manage the household accounts, and gradually took over more responsibilities as the older woman's arthritis worsened. The ranch hands, 4 weathered cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse, were respectful and mostly kept to themselves, though they expressed appreciation for Rose's cooking. Sam was often away from dawn until dusk, working with the cattle or handling business in town. When he was home for meals, he maintained a polite distance, never intruding on Rose's privacy or making her uncomfortable with his attention. But Rose found herself watching him the careful way he washed up before meals, never bringing the dust and dirt of ranch work to the table, how he always thanked her for the food with genuine appreciation, the gentleness with which he treated Mrs. Fletcher, never rushing the older woman or showing impatience with her slowness. As summer turned to fall, the mountains blazed with the gold of changing aspen leaves. The days grew shorter, and the ranch hands worked tirelessly to prepare for winter. Rose found herself busy canning vegetables from the garden, making preserves, and helping Mrs. Fletcher prepare the house for the colder months. One evening in late September, Rose was returning from the garden with a basket of late tomatoes when she heard the unmistakable sound of a child crying. She froze, certain her mind was playing cruel tricks, but the sound came again, a high, frightened wail. Following the noise, Rose rounded the barn to find Sam crouched beside his horse. Before him stood a small girl, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, with tangled dark hair and a tear-streaked face. Her dress was filthy and torn, her feet bare despite the autumn chill. "It's all right," Sam was saying softly. "No one's going to hurt you here." The child hiccuped through her sobs, eyes wide with fear. When she spotted Rose, she shrank back against Sam's horse. "Sam?" Rose questioned, setting down her basket. "Who is this?" Sam straightened, his face troubled. "I found her hiding in one of the outlying pastures. She doesn't speak English, sounds like Ute to me, but I can't be certain. No sign of any adults nearby." Rose approached slowly, kneeling a few feet from the frightened child. "Hello, little one," she said gently. "Are you hungry?" Though the girl couldn't understand the words, she seemed to respond to Rose's tone. Her sobbing quieted to sniffles. "We need to find her people," Sam said, his voice low with concern. "There haven't been Ute in this area for months, not since the army pushed them further west." Rose noticed blood on the child's arm, a long, shallow cut that needed cleaning. "She's hurt, and it's getting dark. Let's take care of her tonight, and you can ride out tomorrow to look for her family." Sam nodded, and with careful movements, Rose extended her hand to the girl. After a moment's hesitation, the child took it, her small fingers clutching Rose's with surprising strength. In the kitchen, Mrs. Fletcher clucked and fussed over the girl, while Rose cleaned and bandaged her arm. The child devoured a bowl of stew and half a loaf of bread, her eyes darting nervously between the adults. "Where will she sleep?" Mrs. Fletcher asked as darkness fell outside. "She can stay in my sitting room," Rose said. "I'll make her a pallet." That night, after settling the exhausted child on a makeshift bed, Rose sat watching the girl's chest rise and fall in sleep. Her dark eyelashes rested against smooth cheeks, her small hand curled beside her face. Something stirred in Rose's heart, a feeling she'd thought had died with her baby months earlier. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Sam stood in the hallway, concern etched on his face. "How is she?" he asked. "Sleeping now," Rose answered. "She was exhausted, poor thing." "Do you have any idea what might have happened to her family?" Sam ran a hand through his hair. "Nothing good, I suspect. There's been talk of skirmishes further west. She might have been separated from her people during a conflict." "What will happen to her if you can't find her family?" Rose asked, already knowing the answer. Sam's expression grew grim. "The Indian Agency would take her, place her in one of those schools meant to civilize native children." His tone made clear his opinion of such places. Rose looked back at the sleeping child. "That can't happen, Sam." "I'll ride out at first light, see what I can learn," he promised. "Try to get some rest." But sleep eluded Rose that night. She sat beside the child, thinking of the cruelty of a world that left little ones motherless and mothers childless. For 3 days, Sam searched the surrounding countryside for any sign of the girl's people. He returned each evening dusty and discouraged. The child whom Rose had begun calling Lily for the wild lilies that grew near where Sam had found her remained fearful, but gradually warmed to Rose's gentle care. On the 4th evening, Sam returned later than usual. Rose had just tucked Lily into bed when she heard his boots on the stairs. His expression told her everything before he spoke. "I found what was left of a small camp, about 15 miles west," he said quietly. "Army patrol tracks all around. No survivors that I could see." Rose's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Sam." "I spoke with Sheriff Taylor in town. He confirmed there was a skirmish with a small band of Ute last week. The official report claims they were hostile. Sam's jaw tightened. The sheriff said if we bring her in, they'll send her to one of those schools. Rose shook her head firmly. No, she stays with us. Sam studied her face. Rose, are you certain? Taking her in? It won't be easy. There will be talk. Let them talk, Rose said with surprising vehemence. She needs us. The decision made, Rose threw herself into caring for Lily. The girl began picking up English words, and Rose found herself learning bits of Ute in return. Mrs. Fletcher doted on the child, sewing her new clothes and teaching her to help with simple household tasks. As winter settled over the Colorado mountains, the ranch became a sanctuary for the unlikely family they had formed. Sam expanded Rose's sitting room, adding a proper bed for Lily and shelves for the toys he carved for her in the evenings by the fire. One snowy December evening, Rose found Sam alone in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched before him as he stared into the fire. Lily is asleep, Rose said, hovering in the doorway. Mrs. Fletcher is retired as well. Sam looked up, his face softening at the sight of her. You should rest too. You've been working hard. Rose entered the room fully, taking the chair opposite his. I wanted to thank you, Sam, for everything you've done for Lily. For me. Sam shook his head. No need for thanks. Having you both here. It's brought life back to this house. He hesitated, then added, I never thought I'd hear a child's laughter here again after my daughter died. Rose's throat tightened with emotion. I never thought I'd have the chance to be a mother. Sam studied her face in the firelight. You're a natural with her. The way you've helped her feel safe, learn our language without forgetting her own, you're giving her a gift few would bother with. She's giving me a gift too, Rose admitted, a reason to look forward to each day. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the flames dance in the hearth. When Rose finally rose to leave, Sam spoke again. Rose, there's something I should tell you. Sheriff Taylor mentioned that some folks in town are talking about Lily living here. Rose tensed. What kind of talk? Nothing specific yet, but there are those who don't approve of a white family raising an Indian child. And, he hesitated, some who find it improper for you to be living here as my employee, especially now that there's a child involved. That's ridiculous, Rose said sharply. You've been nothing but proper and respectful. I know and you know, but people will talk regardless. I'm concerned it might eventually cause problems for Lily. Sam met her eyes directly. There is a solution, though it's not one I'd expect you to consider. Rose's heart began beating faster. What solution? Marriage, Sam said simply. It would silence the gossips and provide Lily with legal protection. Rose stared at him, speechless. Sam hurried to add, I'm not suggesting anything would change between us. You would continue to have your own rooms. It would be an arrangement of convenience, nothing more. I see, Rose said, her voice strangely small. Think on it, Sam said. There's no rush to decide. That night Rose lay awake in her bed, listening to Lily's soft breathing from the adjoining room. Marriage to Sam hadn't crossed her mind before he mentioned it, yet now she found herself unable to think of anything else. Sam was a good man, kind, hard-working, honest. She respected him deeply and had grown comfortable in his company. But marriage was meant to be more than respect and comfort. Her marriage to Thomas had been one of passion and shared dreams, cut tragically short. Could she enter a marriage of convenience with Sam, knowing her heart wasn't fully engaged? Was that fair to either of them? As dawn broke over the mountains, Rose made her decision. She found Sam in the barn, checking on a pregnant mare. When he saw her standing in the doorway, he straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. You're up early, he said. I've been thinking about your proposal, Rose said, stepping into the warmth of the barn. Sam's expression grew serious. And, I can't marry you as a matter of convenience, Sam. Rose saw his face fall slightly before she continued. If I marry again, it needs to be for the right reasons. I understand, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I shouldn't have suggested it. You misunderstand me, Rose said, taking another step toward him. I'm not refusing to marry you. I'm refusing to marry you for convenience alone. Sam went very still. "What are you saying, Rose?" "I'm saying that over these past months you've become important to me, more important than I realized until last night." Rose's heart pounded in her chest. "I care for you, Sam, deeply. If you were to ask me to marry you because you wanted me as your wife, truly your wife, that would be a different matter entirely." The hope that bloomed on Sam's face took years off his appearance. He closed the distance between them, reaching for her hands. "Rose Valenti, I have been falling in love with you since the day I found you crying over that empty crib. I didn't dare hope you might someday feel something similar for me." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I suggested marriage of convenience because I didn't want to presume upon your feelings, but there is nothing convenient about the way I feel for you." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "Then ask me properly, Sam Whitman." Sam's smile was brilliant as he lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands in his. "Rose, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not for appearance's sake, not for Lily's sake, though she is precious to me, but because I love you and want to spend the rest of my days by your side?" "Yes," Rose whispered, joy expanding in her chest like a sunrise. "Yes, I will marry you." When Sam stood and pulled her into his arms, his kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. The wedding took place on Christmas Eve in the Whitman ranch house with Mrs. Fletcher, Lily, and the ranch hands as witnesses. The local minister performed the ceremony before the fireplace, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. Rose wore a simple dark blue dress she had sewn for the occasion, with Mrs. Fletcher's lace collar pinned at the throat. Sam wore his best suit, his hair freshly trimmed. Lily, dressed in a new red dress with her dark hair neatly braided, stood between them during the ceremony, her small hand in Rose's. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sam kissed Rose gently before bending down to scoop Lily into his arms. "We're a family now," he told the girl, who beamed at them both. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house quiet, Rose joined Sam in the master bedroom that was now theirs to share. Her nervousness melted away under his tender attention, and she discovered that love could bloom again, even from soil that had known profound grief. As winter gave way to spring, Rose, Sam, and Lily settled into their life as a family. The ranch prospered under Sam's careful management, and Rose's confidence grew as she took on more responsibilities. Lily thrived, learning English quickly while still practicing her native language with Rose each day. In late March, Rose realized her monthly cycle had not come. After a second month passed without it, she visited Dr. Morrison in town. The confirmation of her pregnancy brought both joy and fear. Memories of her stillborn son still haunted her. When she told Sam that evening, his face lit with happiness before concern shadowed his eyes. "Are you all right with this? After what happened before?" "I'm frightened," Rose admitted, "but also hopeful. This baby will come into a home already filled with love." Sam gathered her in his arms. "We'll take every precaution. You won't be alone this time." When they told Lily she would have a little brother or sister, the child placed her small hand on Rose's still flat stomach with wonder. "Baby grow in there?" she asked in her improving English. "Yes, sweetheart," Rose said, smiling. "The baby is very small now, but will grow bigger each day." As Rose's pregnancy progressed, she found herself drawn to the nursery in their home, the room she had closed off after her son's death. One afternoon in early summer, she finally opened the door. The room was exactly as she had left it, the crib with its never-used blankets, the small clothes in the chest, the rocking chair waiting for a mother and child. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the curtains she had sewn with such hope. Sam found her there, standing in the center of the room with her hands resting on her growing belly. "Rose," he said softly from the doorway. She turned to him with tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of despair this time. "I think it's time to make this room ready again." Sam came to her side, his arm slipping around her waist. "Are you certain?" Rose nodded. "The baby we lost will always be part of me. But this room was built for hope, like you said. It's time to let hope in again. Together they cleaned the room, washing the curtains and airing the tiny garments. Rose sewed new bedding for the crib while Sam repaired the rocking chair and built a small shelf for toys. Lily helped in her own way, arranging pebbles and feathers she had collected on the windowsill as offerings for the coming baby. In late November, when the first snow dusted the mountains, Rose went into labor. Unlike her previous experience, Sam was by her side throughout, with Mrs. Fletcher tending to Lily downstairs. The labor was long but uncomplicated, and as dawn broke over the eastern horizon, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. "He's perfect," Sam whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the doctor placed the swaddled infant in Rose's arms. Rose counted 10 fingers and 10 toes, marveling at the dark hair that already covered the baby's head. "Hello, Thomas Samuel Whitman," she said softly, honoring both the husband she had lost and the one who had brought love back into her life. Later that day, Sam brought Lily in to meet her brother. The child approached the bed cautiously, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Baby brother," Sam explained, lifting her gently to see. Lily studied the infant with serious eyes before breaking into a smile. "He is very small." "He'll grow," Rose assured her. "And he'll need his big sister to help him learn all sorts of things." As winter settled over the ranch, the Whitman household adjusted to life with a newborn. Sam took over many of Lily's care responsibilities, reading to her each night and teaching her to ride her own pony in the paddock near the house. Mrs. Fletcher doted on baby Thomas, crocheting blanket after blanket for him. On Christmas morning, Rose woke early to feed Thomas. After settling him back in his cradle, she stood watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered mountains pink and gold. Sam joined her at the window, slipping his arms around her from behind. "Happy Christmas, Mrs. Whitman," he murmured, kissing her temple. "Happy Christmas," she replied, leaning back against him. "Our first as a complete family." Sam turned her gently to face him. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. Rose unwrapped it to find a silver locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of Lily on one side and baby Thomas on the other. "Oh, Sam," Rose breathed, tears filling her eyes. "It's beautiful." "Open the back," he urged. Rose turned the locket over and found a small compartment. Inside was a tiny lock of dark hair that couldn't belong to either Lily or Thomas. "Is this?" she questioned, her voice catching. Sam nodded. "From your first son. I found it in a small envelope in the nursery when we were cleaning. I thought you might want to keep all your children close to your heart." Rose clutched the locket to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of his gift. "Thank you. For understanding that he'll always be part of our family too." Sam drew her into his arms. "Our family was built from broken pieces, Rose. That doesn't make it any less whole." As they stood together in the quiet morning light, Rose felt a sense of peace she had once thought impossible. The journey from that empty crib to this moment had been long and painful, but the hope Sam had seen in her even then had proven justified. In the years that followed, the Whitman ranch thrived. Rose and Sam welcomed another daughter, Emma, 2 years after Thomas was born. Lily grew into a beautiful young woman who bridged 2 worlds, honoring her Ute heritage while embracing the family that had claimed her as their own. Rose never forgot the baby she had lost or the husband who had died too young. But the grief that had once threatened to consume her became just one thread in the rich tapestry of her life. On Rose and Sam's 10th wedding anniversary, they hosted a celebration at the ranch. Friends from Cherry Creek and neighboring ranches gathered to share in their happiness. The Whitman children, Lily, now 15 and as comfortable on a horse as any cowboy; Thomas, a sturdy 9-year-old with his father's kind eyes, and 7-year-old Emma with her mother's honey-brown hair helped serve the guests and accepted compliments on their parents' behalf. As twilight fell, Sam found Rose sitting alone on the porch, watching the children play a game of tag in the yard. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her. Rose smiled, reaching for his hand. "I was thinking about the day we met. How lost I was. How you said I had built a room for hope." Sam squeezed her fingers. "I remember. You looked at me like I was speaking nonsense." "I couldn't see then what you saw," Rose admitted, "that even in my deepest grief, I'd left space for the possibility of joy." Sam drew her close against his side. "You were the bravest woman I'd ever met, Rose Valenti. Still are, Rose Whitman." "It wasn't bravery," she said softly. "It was desperation. But you were right, hope found its way in, even when I tried to keep it out." As darkness settled over the Colorado mountains, the Whitman family gathered on the porch. Lily taught her siblings a Ute song while Sam and Rose watched, their hands intertwined. The stars emerged one by one above them, bright against the vast sky. Rose thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment, the grief that had nearly broken her, the chance encounter that had begun their story, the frightened child who had taught them to be a family, the son who had healed old wounds, the daughter who completed their circle. None of it had come easily, but all of it had been worth the journey. "What are you thinking about now?" Sam asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Rose smiled at him, at the man who had seen hope in an empty room and possibility in a broken heart. "I'm thinking that some rooms are built for hope," she said, "but others are built by it." Sam's answering smile held all the love of their years together. "And this family?" "This family," Rose said, looking at their children singing beneath the stars, "was built by both." The room that had once stood empty now overflowed with life, not just the physical space of the nursery, but the space in Rose's heart that had seemed forever darkened by loss. In that emptiness, hope had built something new, something stronger than she could have imagined in her darkest days. As the children's song ended and they came running back to the porch, Rose opened her arms to embrace them all, grateful for the cowboy who had shown her that even the emptiest spaces could become foundations for joy. In the decades that followed, the Whitman Ranch remained a place of welcome and warmth. Rose and Sam watched their children grow into adulthood, celebrating their achievements and comforting their sorrows. Lily eventually married the son of a neighboring rancher, blending her two cultures in a ceremony that honored both her Ute heritage and her adoptive family's traditions. Thomas took over management of the ranch when Sam's arthritis made riding difficult, while Emma became a teacher at the school in Cherry Creek. Through it all, Rose kept the silver locket close to her heart, carrying all her children with her, both those who had grown under her care and the one whose brief existence had changed the course of her life. The nursery that had once stood as a monument to grief became a room filled with the laughter of grandchildren who never knew the sorrow that had preceded their joy. On warm summer evenings, Rose and Sam would sit on the porch of the ranch house, their hands intertwined as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. Sometimes they spoke of the past, of Thomas Valenti and the baby they had lost, of Sam's first wife and daughter, of the day he had found Rose crying over an empty crib. More often, they spoke of the present and future, of their children's lives, of their grandchildren's antics, of the legacy they had built together. And in the quiet moments between words, they acknowledged the truth they had learned through years of love and loss, that hope was not merely an emotion but a choice, a room they had built together, furnishing it day by day with courage, perseverance, and love.